cause kind of death. And I'm so sorry that it seems like two people who were pillars in kind of what the movement is of what you're doing have been, you know, taken on another purpose. But yeah, we can hold this mantra together. And I'll just sing a Vedic line of it, random melody, and then I would love to have Emil do some opening, if that's all right.
Mm-hmm. What's the mantra again? Let's see.
So the mantra is Akal Mahakal. And I'm just gonna sing a random thing and join in if you feel like it. Akal Mahakal. Akal Mahakal. Akamahakal, 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 Akamahakal. Yeah.
Thank you, Serena. Thank you so much.
So I just played a little mouth harp. Um, it's an instrument that works with the overtone series as well, and it's a series that's very deeply embedded in nature, in the natural world, and somehow it feels appropriate right now. May all beings be blessed. May all beings be peaceful.
Thank you, Emil. Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful setting the space. And, you know, I said the same with when Tony died, when Tony Lane, that in these times, my faith in the Hermetic principles of, in particular in this case, as above and so below, is like if it's going on this plane, it's quite possibly going on all of them, and like a bit of a showdown moment. And people like Tony and Boz are being they're calling in the big guns, you know. They're going into different realms to work in in ways we can't even understand or comprehend. But I just trust that there's an intelligence and I have faith. So it's like when it happens to one person, you can believe that. And when it happens to two that hold the same place in your life, it's like that squared. So yeah, just all the feelings of that. Sherry, welcome back to our feedback sessions. Thank you. It's so great to have you here. Missed your wisdom this week.
I wanted to actually thank you for saying something. I wanted to apologize. I have this immersion class that starts at 11:30 these days, and then it was a busy week, and I just couldn't get there. But my heart had been there, and I'm so inspired by what I've seen. And I would love to know if there's like some notes or the recording of any of the calls would be great.
Yeah. We've definitely got the recording. We've got a lot of notes that we can share. Actually, we'll share around what we wanted to get feedback on the questionnaire and get that back. And I think the most important piece of feedback we've been incorporating into a kind of ongoing strategy is we don't want to just be a think tank. You know, it's like, we don't want there's value in bringing the group together. There's value in what we've done. But it doesn't feel complete as a container. I'd love to just open others to this, to any reflections, concluding kind of reflections that you've got. But, and so we've been in conversation all week around like, how do we turn this into essentially like a gamed accelerator for the Planetary Commons with a structure that's repeatable and followable by anyone. And it's almost like a playbook that people can use, and it's truly self-organizing collective intelligence. And so what we've landed on is, you know, we kind of like number 8 around here. And so what we landed on is fractal of the fractal, which is essentially like what we achieve in 8 hours in a week, we can achieve in 8 weeks across 4 games. So essentially introducing the yin and yang concept week on, week off, and an 8-week journey based on seed, sprout, blossom, harvest. And what we just went through was seed. And I think that was a very effective seed to come to surface the collective intelligence in a shared container. And now the question is, if we move, like, it's not if, it feels like a worthy experiment that next week would move into Sprout. And we'd look at those, like what's been brought forward and say, okay, what's got legs, who's got the energy. And maybe one of the things we've been thinking about is like for people that can't attend, because we want to make sure that everybody has like, okay, it's like playing the game is a 1-week commitment, but then there's incentives to have you continue playing to see the ideas or the concepts or the projects kind of develop to a deeper maturity so they can really take root in the world. And so we've been thinking yesterday about ways of incentivizing at each gate, and like very much that we're designing this with everyone. But then each person, if they don't have the ability to stay on, would have the ability to nominate someone that would take their place. And if they don't do that, it goes to the group to go and say, okay, who else could we bring in for this each stage? And then ultimately the week after next would be Blossom, and that's all about cross-pollination. So it's all about like us going into each of the projects and seeing how we can add our own pollen to it. And so certain people would hold like the flower archetype, others would hold the bee archetype, and we'd move around with ways to like, how do we apply this unique ability to gather leaders in a particular field. So I think that's hopefully a good conclusion of our conversations this week. And we've covered a lot, but that was sort of like where it comes down to brass tacks, nuts and bolts, next steps. So anything, do you want to, anything, Serena, Emil, Shane, Andrea, who have just been the pillars of this, consistently showing up for 2 hours every day, giving feedback and such beautiful wisdom and such a deep connection to each one of you, and gratitude, and kind of thank you for seeing what we're seeing, which is that this has got legs. Anything you want to add?
I think one of the things that's come up a lot is how sound resonates and the depth of like the signal integrity in what we want to bring to the field. More than anything else, it's like, what is the pure narrative that's playing through the game? What's playing through the sound? What's playing through the environment? And the thing that I think Sherry said a couple of days ago, the game around the game, and showing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game around the game. And the deeper dives that we're all that we want to take in it, and like the lessons learned in that, and how to best form the next steps, which we want to start next week. So that's the biggest piece for me right now, is like how to format next week, and it's in a way that's like the highest value for everyone, people that have been involved, and then new people that could come into the fold.
I have a question to sort of iterate, like every time we're doing this, it feels like it's like we're creating an MVP, most viable product of that week, and seeing how the iteration goes. So maybe we can brainstorm a little bit collectively about what we want the end of next week and the phase that we're sort of defining that container as to look like, as what's unfolded by the end of the time together concretely, but leave it loosely in this container where there's room for manifestation and ideas and the yin and the creativity. But if we were to start this next week, what would be what we would want to see by the end of it?
Would you mind starting with answering that question for you?
Yeah. Okay, so I'll play the game of my game. I would like to see that by the end of next week, there are these eight concepts that we've created, these 8 ideas have more anchors in them, meaning that there's maybe a team leader for each of those that's instilled, and there's a skeleton game plan of next steps for each of those projects. And there's also maybe a prioritization of projects based on the feedback we get from the survey in terms of interest and what would be more driving than others during this time.
Do we have the survey already or not?
Yeah, we sent that out. Andrea, I'm so sorry. I realized you must not be on the group email I sent. Somehow your emails got.
Yeah, might have been. Yeah, I'll look at that and see if there was something. I was a late addition to it, so that's probably why that all.
I think what's happened is I'm copy and pasted from the wrong group emails, and yours is one that didn't. Yeah, I apologize. So, but I'll.
It's not here, which I love.
Exactly. Like, you haven't been getting my daily emails, but nonetheless, double goal.
Somehow I'm here.
Every morning in our check-ins, we close them. I'm here and I'm in. The questionnaire survey is like it's ready and been sent out. Marnie and Brian worked on it, and that would be super helpful. It's got things like an endorsing quote that we could use for the deck as we go and fundraise for this, and creating more infrastructure around the game, and bringing in facilitators, and making the game. One thing is just like making it actually a game, and making the experience of it something that people go and tell everybody, like, I've just been through this thing, unlike anything I've done professionally before. It should be that kind of bar that we aim for, and that's what it feels like to be a sort of to serve the planetary commons. And it does feel like, from an accelerator perspective, because we can pick there's two routes we can go down, right? There's picking the community projects that are all around like achieving the SDGs, for example. But what feels most timely right now, and a kind of a focused place to start, is to invite this to be a community accelerator for the planetary commons, so that we're inviting fundable community solutions for the commons. It's more focused, but like, as Shane, you were saying yesterday, it feels like that focus is a good place to start, at least to run a kind of more have a narrower area of like inviting people to see if that resonates with them, and would love that feedback, because the alternate is just these projects obviously don't need to be, they can be created as like commercial companies. That doesn't take away any amount that they would be serving the planetary commons. Just to be clear, it's not like, just to be clear on that concept of what it is to serve the commons.
I think to mirror off of what Serena was saying too, in regards to like the 8 concepts, I think because of the layering, in terms of kind of the cross-pollination, and how, we were to take the 8 concepts, or the 8 topics, and then kind of group them into even smaller sections, so that way, sound reference, moves in with soundscaping, which then moves into, like, they get paired. So then, instead of having 8 grand topics that we have to discuss, it becomes, maybe down to 4. And then by the second week, it comes down to 2, and not necessarily that it has to get to this singular unit that we ultimately get to. But I think because of some of the relevancy and the kind of cross-pollination that happens between some of these spaces, I think it'll help. Well, suggestively, I think it'll help
I like
to move in this direction, because then that way, instead of having 22 minds having to focus on 8 topics, you have 22 minds only focusing on 4, and then or 2, because then, and then those 2 or 4 topics have these specific breakdowns in between, like, okay, cool, how do we address sound reverence with sound pollution, with all of this stuff. So not that I'm just speaking openly, it doesn't have to go in that direction, but because I remember when we were like, you know, breaking off into groups around these 8 topics, everyone was like, oh my God, you know, like I want to be in this group or I want to be in that group because like I could totally contribute something to this and this and that and that. And like, and I mean, definitely from my experience, when I was looking at all the 8 topics, I was like, I have something to say about all these, you know, like in every respect because of just my experience thinking.
Can I interrupt you, Shane, just because I have to leave in like a few minutes?
Yeah, of course.
But I just want to name something. What you're speaking directly to right there is a kind of a cross-pollination piece that I can send you something, Lucienne. It's basically from Barbara Marx Hubbard's work around the syncons, which the first one was done in the 70s, and it was a synergistic convergence. So what it does is you have these different areas, and then there's a process in which people can actually, they're here in their sector or their solution, and then there's this kind of an intentionality of how you can cross-pollinate. And I think trying to figure out a way to design that in might be really helpful in kind of addressing what Shane is speaking to. And I just sent it out to a couple other people who were kind of looking at like, how do we actually take a whole system and create more of a synergy in it and lift up that collective intelligence. So I can send it to you and you can see how it might weave in. And I just want to
just say I really appreciate you sharing that I can see already. And anything else, any other reflections before you go, Sherry? Any kind of guidance on what your intuition says around you hold so much here, so it's like this notion of 8 weeks together for actually playing the game. Do you would love any reflections you've got?
I feel like I'm still trying to get my head around the in-breath, the out-breath, the on-off, and the I have the conceptual idea, but it's like, is it all through like sound healing for 8 weeks? Is that?
So it would be like sound for health for a 8-week program is how we're thinking about it.
Okay, that was, so food next week is that?
It would be an 8-week, food gets kicked off. So then
okay.
Everyone starts off with a week and then it continues as the projects mature.
Yeah, there's lots of ideas, and I'm if I can watch some of the videos, that will help me get a little bit more oriented to like where you were yesterday, and then I'll get caught up and because this is the kind of stuff I geek out on, and I have friends in Austin who really want to play the game, so it could be interesting once there's enough of a template.
Who are you in Austin, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, it's Rachel Schneider, and I'm in conversations with Steph Blaustein and the folks from Indra's warehouse. They're creating a media channel, and there's One Nation folks. So there's like, and I know then other people. So there's a really powerful like ecosystem there that I think could be good for planting a seed.
That's my hometown. That's why I was curious.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I know Seth very well, and Tino Rodriguez, and like all those people.
Yeah, I feel like this is such a, and I have actually something about octet. It comes from a book called Creative Transformations and the Power of 8. And it's actually I really feel like because of the vibration of the 8 that you are, that the birthing out of that with then the next group, the people around it, is coming from that level of like what you said, Andre. I really love that, like that narrative, that pure narrative coming through. So I feel grateful. It's like the template is started really beautifully. And
well, you just gave me an idea there, Sherry, that I just like how everything's happening is like when I feel something familiar from it, like even though it's the first time I've heard it. And that's that. What if we were to say as like, hey, this is the structure of the game that we're playing. Is that week one is 22 people with the goal to come up with eight different fundable community solutions. Week three then is Sprout, and that's where our goal is for each of one of those projects to bring together 8 people. And if the project only gets a small number of people, let's say 2 or 3, they can go join the other and bring that project into it. And so the idea, if we try and get teams of 8 on each of these projects, but it's led by the person that's leading that may quickly evolve them into like what's got legs or not. As well, do you see where I'm getting at?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm just thinking others may have. I know Sherry, you've got to go, but that was just your words triggered in me. Was like in a good way.
Yeah, awesome. Well, I'm so excited. I'm so sad that I missed it. Otherwise I would have been here. It was pretty epic. It's an epic space. So I look forward to seeing how I can dive in and keep contributing. So
Thank you.
Playing. Okay, you guys. See you later.
Thank you, Sherry.
Thank you, Sherry.
Bye.
Bye, Sherry.
How do you feel, and Josh O'Brien, how do we feel like there was something there in not staying as a bigger group of 22, which could be a little unwieldy as a group?
I really would love to speak to that because I've been thinking about this, that the productivity level, you could say, I feel like it's going to get much more efficient the sooner that groups start meeting on their own with their own, sense of leadership, and some kind of a structure that works between having groups meeting on their own and then a level of synthesis with you and Savannah House so that could be either the group leaders or any amount of people from each of the individual groups. I think would be the best way to get people.
And all previous groups.
And all
everybody that's played the game for Sound for Health could be welcome to those like revelations.
Yeah, that's true. There also then need to be a structure for how things are getting shared, because everyone has to get on the same page of what the groups are doing without getting,
totally
Zoom calls.
Totally interesting. Yeah, totally.
So the structure for making sure all the information gets brought into the collective, and then everyone goes off and does their own things in their groups for a while and comes back like, okay, well, what groups do we want to combine? Like maybe there's other group leaders connecting with each other saying like, hey, like, because I also like what Shane brought up. I was thinking this too about combining groups and maybe having fewer projects once we see what overlap there is. And it could say 8 projects as well. I see that as a lot to wrap our head around as one Sound for Health group. It's 8 different projects, but that could happen. But we'll also know better as we break into smaller groups and have those groups start meeting, especially with like 5 to 8 people in a call. There's a lot more opportunity for the inspiration to come through, I feel.
The question I have that comes up is like
in regards to the week by week process, like maybe small groups. Oh, it's all good. Maybe small groups are meeting during the off week, and then there's like some group synthesis during the on week, but also more individual group meeting during the on week. That got a little convoluted. But
no. Like keep going, keep going on the other. You're describing our plan, that as you're speaking.
Yeah, I see the majority of the stuff happening in smaller groups, with maybe a third at most of the time between like the collective and anyone that wants to come observe, happening in the synthesis periods. Yeah, but more small group meeting.
Okay. And they wouldn't necessarily need to be facilitated by a member of our team. That could be the kind of once people come back. So it could be completely self-organized, and we would just provide the tools and the space and the structure for it to happen. And then people come back to like the 22 plus however many's been formed in the small groups. Do you think we should try to put some like recommended numbers on the size of these small groups, saying to a team lead, like, we'd recommend you try and bring together 8 people?
I would say have a maximum and a minimum, but not an exact recommended number, like 3 to 8 or 3 to 10, because past a certain number, it'll get unwieldy. That's my feeling on it.
3 to 8 feels really nice.
3 to 8.
Yeah.
I do think it would be beneficial if you knew when these groups were like organizing or meeting, and you could just how you sort of like popped in when me and Mel and her and Mikra were talking, and you just kind of checked in. I think it would be good for one member of the team to do that, and also kind of just like have a little bit of like an observational list around, so you can see how the groups are interacting, and make sure that, like, you know, number one, everyone's cohesively getting along with the task, because I can already see that there's a lot of strong personalities just from our sound group, and everyone's gonna have their like, yes, this is the right way kind of thing. So just kind of popping around as like a development person to just make sure, and you can kind of like guide a little bit. I would recommend doing that, but letting it be as autonomous as well, like kind of being that silent wall, like you know, fly on the wall, but interjecting through your observation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Which is,
Yeah.
I guess, kind of like a change management or organizational psychologist function, you know, where that person is going around to each of them and then synthesizing to you guys, which personally I would love to do. But like, you know, just I think that way you have one person that's also communicating like from their funnel what's happening that you resonate with too, and then you can kind of iterate and be like, okay, well, our end goal is this, and what do you think about layering this? And we can then be champions for like leading those things through with the team leader, you know.
The thing that's also come up with listening to Serena is like, we seem to have an evolving narrative for Sound of Health. And it's like all the different branches have a different nuance to that evolving narrative or that evolving meme. So if we can get more clear on what that evolving narrative is as of right now, knowing that there's going to be additions to it that we get more clarity on going forward, then we're going to have more of a pure signal going forward through the game. If that makes sense.
That makes sense to me. And also, I think just to Shane's point, I think he made yesterday so clearly, is that like a lot of sound healers, you know, and practitioners in the field are really good at being practitioners and like rendering that sort of service or offering to someone. But when you ask them to take something and form a container to build a skeletal business, basically these mini units, you're not going to get that same level of functionality. And I think people are going to, number one, get a little bit like it's going to be a new thing for some of them. So giving them something to kind of like anchor in, like and Andrea's saying, some kind of container that they need to play in would be good as well.
Yeah, I was going to speak a little bit.
They don't have, like, some people don't have that, like, you know, entrepreneurial or like kind of business aspect of what is scalability when it comes to this idea and this concept and it being funded. Like we saw this with the robotic bowls, right? You saw, you know, positive and negative for it, but ultimately in the future down the line, there is a use case for that. And so you want people who can have that broad-minded vision of seeing those use cases, even if they disagree or, you know, that sort of thing too.
Yeah.
So making sure you have those touch points by inserting yourself in the groups I think will save you guys time in the long run.
Yeah. This is feeling really coming together. I love how it's like each day, day by day, it's shedding a layer and becoming clearer. It's coming into form in a way that I'm just observing as a kind of um, you know, when we started, there were a couple of occasions where we were like, "We're making this up as we go along," which is one way of saying, one way of saying it's revealing itself real time. So
You guys are really in the yin. That's what it was. You
You're
know?
perceiving.
so this is a peak moment for that. I feel like both what each of you have been describing. I feel a strong sense of like co-creation with you of that, and it's a really beautiful feeling. So thank you.
I think another piece too, that is inherent in this kind of evolution of team building, and this is something I reflected on years ago, because you know the the older paradigm was always this hierarchy, right? It's this strata of the leaders are at the top, my minions and my slaves are at the bottom. And in this time of Aquarian age of empowering ourselves, becoming our own healers, and trusting our own truth in all of these things, and activating the innate infinite wisdom that we all carry, through all the lifetimes of experiences that we all share with one another. How do you create leadership that's parallel? Because the indifference of hierarchy, you know, and this strata that has been, you know, used since time was before time to maintain control over those who are less informed and less powerful, to those who are in power and have either gained that through whatever devices they have, through royalty, through you know, godhood, through, you know, whatever we can use all the descriptor words. How do we maintain a level of leadership that is no longer a strata, but is actually a parallel that runs across the line versus above and below the line? And this aspect of empowerment, I think, is incredibly, one, enriching in so many different ways, but also incredibly challenging, because of how do you ensure that everybody is a leader in their own role, is heard, and then is also valued, in that one idea does not supersede another or carry more weight than another. And then, speaking more specifically to this group of this experience in the game, having like one particular leader, you know, for each particular group is slightly relative, correct? Because of, you know, Lucian, your experience and your expertise is different from my experience and my expertise, versus Serena, versus Emil, versus everybody involved. So who, from a certain perspective, and I'm just playing devil's advocate in this, who gets to kind of, in certain respects, choose who, I don't want to say is more important, but who carries the torch, you know, and then who is then the torch passed on to, and then how is this done in such a way that it appropriately activates the highest level of efficiency for goal creating and goal tending, and you know, I don't want to say solution orientation, but more of just fulfilling goals, you know, at specific timelines and guidelines for, you know, deadlines for being able to, like, okay, cool, you know, by like this week we need this MVP, by this week we need, you know, this type of theorem and practicum, you know, and so forth and so on. So I offer that as just reflection as we move into this space, because of, or as we move further into this space, because this is something I definitely have tried to, within the sound healing community especially, and as over the years, as I've met more and more sound healers who are, you know, who either struggle with their experience of trying to, and also assisting others and mentoring those who you know, are either starting on their journey of like trying to facilitate to the community, and like how to help others like you know, really kind of brand themselves as entrepreneurs, so, you know, and to really dislodge themselves from the matrix and to not have to subscribe to the way things have been done as a model of how things should be done. And let's just say I'm still figuring it out, like, you know, and year by year by year it keeps changing because of the way that the environment changes, the way that the needs change for the community, and so forth and so on. And this is what ultimately, you know, in a certain respect, is what brought me here, you know, like to participate in this type of kind of collective intelligence, to gather our minds so that we can all pull from the same resources, to not only uplift but empower those that are within the kind of inner circle of the mandala, to hopefully spread out to the outer circles of the mandalas that we have yet to create and to yet to connect to. So but that's just my offering for that particular piece, as you all, you know, begin to create a greater and more focused and accurate structure of how you see the game kind of unfolding for yourself.
Shane, are you just saying, how do we choose leaders, and what are their roles, and how do we make sure they don't become too, like, I don't know, feeling like they're better than other people? Is that what you're saying?
I mean, essentially, yes. I mean, you know, because it's like when a leader is given a role, or when a leader is put in a position, for me personally, I've always enjoyed more of a council, in the sense that, you know, the leadership is shared, versus that, like, you know, you are the governing voice over this whole thing, you know, and then, because then it creates these structures of ego of, like, every, you know, like, above all, at the end of the day, my voice is what conquers over anybody else's opinion or other info or other information, because I am, you know, because of X, Y, and Z classifications or qualifications of said topic, you know, or I've been assigned this because Lucian told me I'm the leader of this group. You know, it's like, bro, you know, like, step off your high horse, you know. So it's like, it's this interesting dynamic of power play that evolves through almost distinguishable titles that ultimately mean nothing, because they're pre-assigned, or they're assigned, you know, voluntarily. So it's like, it's this dynamic that I've had to play with for years, of trying to understand, like, okay, how do you dissolve this while still creating a form of cohesion that makes sense, in terms of how everybody can play a role as a leader, while also maintaining aspects of teamwork, you know, without it being an egoic, you know, like, egoic focus of, like, okay, who's really actually leading the ball? Because ultimately, you know, and I know a lot of us have seen these memes where it's like, you know, a real leader is somebody who's actually at the front of the line, like, helping his whole crew, or his or her crew, move forward. And then there's, like, the actually oppression kings and queens who are, like, at the back, like, whipping everybody forward. So it's like,
So what I'm getting
and
also is, how do we model new paradigm leadership within the game?
totally.
Yeah, thank you.
This is our whole thing, you guys. This is
Guys, I love you.
I know. This is our whole, like, we're like again and again walking back through it. Like, how do we keep this yin, keep it open, sourced, open, leadership, everyone's involved, everyone had, you know, all of it, but at the same time, have enough direction that it takes leadership to accomplish something.
I think that Shane's, what's coming to me is the language, right? The programming of how we're describing what these things are. So from a yin perspective, my connection with you guys, I see you guys kind of as Sherpas. I don't see you as these, like, you know, these, like, giant, like, you know, yes, you're very influential. You guys have done a lot of great things. Savannah House is amazing. Like, it's amazing to get this sort of, you know, like, I know we're not in a think tank, that's what we don't want to do, but, like, it's amazing to have this sort of conversation and enjoy it with you guys like this. But I truly see you as someone who I can learn from, and is a Sherpa who's gone and navigated into different dimensions that I'm interested in, that I can also hopefully bring value to. And I see you guys as those guides. And I really like the idea, what Shane was saying about creating, like, kind of council. Each of these things is a council that takes away that like at least programming of language structure. And then I wanted to bring up to the point that it seems as though there's going to be, with each project, even if there's 4 main projects, it's a lot of work for very little people. So like people are going to have to play an active role in whatever they're going to contribute, because there's not enough people to actually like hold it then. And I also was going to say that I think natural Sherpas are going to emerge based on the ability to commit the time. So part of the game, like right now, from an analogy perspective, Lucian, what I think you did with this week and getting us together and us kind of being the like consistent ones that showed up was like, you took a tree that had a bunch of coconuts on it and you shook it really hard, and you gave, you know, like, does that make sense? Like, you shook the tree. And us 6 or 7 coconuts wanted to continue being on the root of that tree and continue kind of growing and like being watered through the tree instead of going off and like waiting for the next step. We wanted to continue being in the root, right? So you still have all those coconuts kind of around, falling around on the ground, you know, they're waiting, they're hanging. You even have some coconuts like not getting the email and like deciding to email everyone like, let's do this, let's do that, like already kind of sparking, right? But it's like, you're the Sherpa of all those coconuts. At some point you got to collect them, and then, you know, the ones that are still on the tree need to be the, you know, kind of guides for the other ones, and however you want to like look at that. But I think languaging, like the sense of the way you linguistically, you know, like, that's why I think we were talking about like yin and yang and marketing right now, and using these terminologies that are a layer deeper than integrated and holistic and this crap that we've already heard. You're going to take it another layer deeper. Same thing with these little groups. Like, how can you take it a layer deeper and really deprogram these languages around managers and around leadership, team leaders, right? What do we call that instead?
I love the concept of Sherpa, and there's a couple of thoughts. Firstly, my broken heart is so being embalmed right now with just what's emerging on this call. It fills me with such deep gratitude for you, each of you that have contributed. Jamie Wheel talks about a concept of the rotating hierophant. And that concept immediately struck me as something that is kind of sacred circling, one might call it. But a hierophant is essentially God's representative in a circle. So the Pope, shaman, etc., would be that kind of the human embodiment of God or Christ consciousness. And so what has been kind of a big part of my personal just prayer and inquiry is, to what extent are we actually bringing in some structures of like what you might traditionally see in religious traditions into the game, and like this notion of 8 people circling together with a particular format and a particular even ritual. So we've been thinking about that, and one thing that came to mind is, if you imagine like every container, every community belongs to another community, which belongs to another community, which form this sphere. So at every step at each of the community, what would happen is anybody that belonged to that community could step into the middle of the circle. And we could do this, we could design this virtually as well, but if it's in a real world community, everybody would step into the middle of the circle that wanted to represent the community, or represent serve. Like, true leadership is a form of service, like a kind of the knight archetype. And the people then that were in that community could go and choose who to stand behind. And they would literally go stand behind that person. And so then, someone would see, okay, well, I don't have the people, so I can now choose to go stand behind this people, and the people that were standing behind me can choose to go where they want. We ended up landing up on like who are the representatives, and if you imagine doing that in a hive sense, that every community belonged to another, which belonged to another, and there's so many levels of the game. It goes rabbit holes all the way down, and they would essentially be representing all the way down to such a point that we would actually have a planetary council. And so like that's one thing of the game, is like, can we actually create this like circle concept that would go, to your point, Shane, like I actually think people carry generational trauma around leadership.
Yes.
And like the way it's been done, and like in their life, but it's multi-generational, like the servitude nation, like it's so wrapped up in racism as well. So but like how we break free of that feels like this is like what we can co-create together from a kind of representation perspective. So just wanting to digest and reflect what you shared, Shane, and you know, Ed, Serena, Andrea, or Emil as well. So Brian, welcome. Thank you for being here. That's just
I definitely know.
thoughts.
I mean, leadership has always generally fallen to the elders, because it's, you know, I mean, if you look at especially Native American tribes, and it wasn't because they had power. I mean, don't get me wrong, power was ingrained in the process, but it's because they had knowledge and they had wisdom, and that was the reason why the elders were generally the carriers of the leadership and the mental responsibility for the group. And I think, you know, especially now, given the evolution of our experience in our modern day age, you know, it's like our age does not dictate the lack of knowledge, nor the or the kind of, you know, heavy ingrained kind of institutionalization that has kind of inceptualized these kind of generational concepts. And so being able to, you know, I know some 20-year-olds who I'm like, how do you know the things that you know? And like, holy crap, you know, if you were to have like a team of like 50 people behind you, you could totally change the world, you know. To, I know 50-year-olds who I'm just like, how are you in your position? Because like you're just fucking batshit nuts, you know, like so, you know, it's interesting, this kind of varying demographic of how you know, we not only recognize just the 3D presence of our experience here in our journey of expertise in the things that we dedicate ourselves to also the very deep acknowledgement of some people who can tap into this infinite knowledge and this infinite wisdom beyond their years and beyond their physical makeup of what it is that their vessel is embodying. So and being able to create systems to help create more support for that in a lot of different ways, without sexism and racism and ageism and all of these kind of things. So, you know, that everybody can be incredibly recognized for their gifts and what they bring to the table.
And I think, Shane, what this brings up in me is this observation that what I feel is needed to be birthed in the world right now is not like anything has ever been birthed before.
Exactly.
It doesn't look like a company, it doesn't look like a foundation, it doesn't look like a new nation. You know, it's kind of like this omniverse of different, like each a different, almost like bricks, like threads in this tapestry. And so how do we pull that together in a way that would challenge so much of the status quo, but not throw the baby out with the bathwater? Because leadership's useful and like things get done through leadership. There's a way it's that, there's a reason it's that way. So it's kind of like, how do we not, like, how do we bring the best and bring what serves in a way that in a way that like leaves plenty of room for experimentation, because we're likely to keep getting it wrong. And what we don't want to end up with is a situation like the American Constitution where stupid rules get baked into the future of the system because they were put there by the founding people that only knew like this much compared to now what we know. So we don't want that kind of thing. So how do we create a culture of like deep, like rapid experimentation and prototyping with like bringing what's good and what works? You know, it's.
I think another piece to this is because I was actually talking to Andrea about this yesterday, where a lot of the I don't even want to say success, but more so of a lot of the analysis that I've been, that helped me kind of more concretely focus on how to create up leveling within the sound healing community was, and hilariously enough, when we were discussing, when we came up with all the 8 topics that we did, I was just like, oh my God, this is like so awesome that we're talking about all these things, because this is literally all the things that I identified within the current model. And I think what will kind of help as a structural ability to of interpretation for all aspects of the game, for every single topic that the game begins to tackle for these kind of community initiatives and so forth and so on, will be, and I know you quote from Bucky a lot, and being able to create, instead of trying to reinvent the model, or try to reinvent the wheel, just like look at it and try to improve it, right? I think that very specific thing is going to be fundamental to, as you discuss these topics, for instance, soundscaping, sound reference, and all this kind of stuff. Once the like identifiers are there of like, okay, cool, these are the things that we should focus on. I think the next step after that should then be, okay, now we have the topic. Now let's look at the current model. Like, what is within the framework of what's being done? Because then that way it can create a little bit more homogeny around the focus of the group, and the leaders that are then instructing and helping guide. Okay, cool. Like, because then everybody can share their expertise, whether it is the person who's doing it within that model, on one-on-one experiences with just clients, to the person who's doing it with groups, or the person who's doing it at a more macro level of being able to coordinate like massive experiences where, there are pods or satellites that are happening all over the place. And so, because definitely within the 8 topics, this is where I was like, when I was looking at the 8 topics, I was like, yeah, I have a model for that. I have a model for that. I have a model for that, because these were all topics that I had to basically look at and see within the framework of what's
Anyway, do we lose Shane, or did we lose us? You're all there.
Yeah,
existing
I think we lost
around
him.
that.
There he is.
Shane, we'd lost you just there for a sec. Pre-existing models.
Coming back.
Oh, okay. Oh, weird. Basically, what I was saying was basically looking at the pre-existing models, and then kind of not necessarily making my judgment calls, but more so of like looking at the model and then literally having to deconstruct it, because to kind of develop these ideas of how to improve it. Because instead of building upon, because the current challenge that I see within a lot of these models, and you see them in everything, that innovation is suffering on a majority of industries because of one thing and one thing only. Everybody is predominantly copying each other, because instead of actually creating new ideas, they're just like, oh, look at this model, that's working for them, let's do that too. And then like this yoga studio is like, oh, cool, Bikram yoga, hot yoga, okay, cool, let's do that too. Like we don't need to change the model, let's just copy it. And so there's like kind of this stagnation that's happening within the environments. And this is where, for me, I was like, I don't want to do that if I'm going to create a new system for sound healing. Like, in terms of, I really need to go above and beyond all of my comfort zones to really figure out, like, okay, what actually fits well, what's working within the system. Let's dissolve the things that aren't working, and let's also pioneer some new ideas and fresh thoughts that are like incredibly, you know, so far out in the impossible that they actually are the only probable idea of being able to bring kind of a certain level of just like, oh my God, you're batshit crazy, but this is going to totally work from a certain perspective.
So
that's where the robotic arms came from. So
yeah, I mean, like this is like take systems change at a systemic level to first principles.
Yeah.
For a game, and like start there, and like that's one of the things we were trying to do with the rules of the game. You know, they're like kind of like take you back to first principles. But so if if this was like, where would this fit in the rounds, would you say, Shane? Like and feel free, anyone else that's like, this is bringing things up for them. Like if we were to go to, like in the process of seed, sprout, blossom, harvest, this going back to first principles of what exists, why, who's it serving, like if we were to reimagine this in the service of the planetary commons and that money wasn't a problem to bring in, how would we design it? And that's actually a useful role for people to be playing. And like, maybe if we had like 500 batshit crazy ideas that all needed collectively, like, let's say $500 million, that's actually easier to fundraise than trying to raise for any one of those alone. If you get where I'm getting at there, which
I
is
think it
my
would fall between sprout and harvest, my personal
yeah.
I
So
think that
it would be a continued process between sprout, blossom, and harvest. So you'd like build it into a connective layer or something. Okay.
I think that there's the word that's coming up to me the most, even as you were explaining the kind of circles within the circles and the communities upon the communities, is trust. And how I think at what point in the game is someone truly like trusting the process in the game? And I think that might help pinpoint where to sort of insert some of these strategies as well.
I've felt for a long time that you know, I believe that we're already in World War III and that it's a war on trust.
That's what I feel too, is that there's a lot of trust stuff that comes up, trauma around this too. Just like there's trauma, you know, around leadership and money and, you know, even familial trauma. There's trauma around trust.
Yeah, deep trauma, because like the opposite of love is fear, and we've had like an entire industry built off that fear.
Yeah.
So like,
it's like being Mark, fear is like what's being served, you know, like right now outside. It's like,
so from a trust perspective, this has been like a really deep inquiry of in myself, and so maybe that could be an area we would play a game on, is like what would be the ways of, like, as a community experience, coming into contact with others that share your like dharma and purpose in life in such a way that those rituals and those practices that we introduce during those yin periods are so well designed for like the healing journey and for building trust and building like deep connection and kind of brotherhood, sisterhood, that that would be part of the experience, is like that embalming that wound of trust, you know, through like direct experience. And like, how could we think about that kind of thing being like, that's what the game is doing, is it's actually like helping people heal themselves of their traumas in relation with others.
Can I add something on that?
Please, yeah.
So in like the healthcare model right now, we were kind of having this blind trust to it for so long. And then Corona came in, and now we have so many different narratives to like we need a mask, we need gloves, we need all these different things. And it's like, they're not telling you to trust your immune system, trust yourself as the base of everything. Like that is the biggest like thing I'm working with people is like, it's like you don't even trust yourself. It's like, do you trust the other person? Do you trust your healthcare system? Do you trust the insurance model to allow you to have certain modalities to take care of you? So it's like, I think that's why the game is a trust model, like you guys have said, because it's like trusting that sound or food or community in different ways are going to be healing in this chaotic state that Corona has beautifully brought up to for everyone to look at their structures of what they have in place right now.
Beautifully said.
Yeah, I really like that element that you're bringing up, Andrea, of self-trust, and that being the seed of where we can start to trust others, and also, trust the process, and people being tuned into their intuition about things, really. Because, like, in regards to leadership, I feel like we get a gut sense when things are off, or something is shifting within the intentions of someone that's being a director, from collective service to personal service, and that we are okay with like speaking out about that, being like, oh well, is that really best for everyone? Is that really the most full, complete next step for serving the planetary commons and the project we're creating? And trust in ourselves that we can bring that up without being persecuted for it as well. Because that's part of where the ancestral trauma around leadership comes in, is people being persecuted by leaders for speaking up.
Mm-hmm.
And if we address that within ourselves, like the trust of like, if I can say something, I can say something and have that either be discussed and understood why that was coming up in me, or basically just a safe space for anyone to address leadership. And then leaders too, trusting that they'll be spoken to by the people they're working with if things feel off. That it won't just be like, oh, like you're the leader, like, okay. So yeah, the self-trust, that I think is a powerful thing to wrap.
And I think people are like really wanting to tune in to learn how to trust themselves, and also like, it's one thing to feel heard by a group, but it's another thing to be heard by yourself, and to know what the distinction between an intuitive thought or feeling is versus a thought of anxiety and overwhelm that you then attach to as your intuition, which leads you into a different direction because it's not really coming from that rooted place. And knowing the difference between the two deeply, so that you can, then trust the actions you're taking with your life moving forward too, in all aspects and all decisions. And like you beautifully said, Andrea, the immunity, being, trusting our own inner healer, our own ability to actually, regenerate what we need inside our bodies and our minds and our spirits. And I think bringing up trust in this game is going to bring up a lot for people. And I also wanted to share that me personally, I went through my own layer of trusting in this game already. And I think that I want other people to experience that, because it was really deep and unlocked a little piece more for me to continue and make me continue to strive and go and do what it is that I do best, and know that my purpose is really deeply there. And I think the reason that happened, truthfully, is because I had a previous connection to Savannah House. And so I want to know how to bring that same feeling in from an unbiased perspective to make other people feel open enough to share and open enough to want to be heard, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
I think too, in a certain respect, between the layers of people trusting their own intuition and their empowerment and their aspects of leadership, I'm going to play on the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah.
There are some people who actually very intrinsically just want to be led.
So true.
And, you know,
Oh,
because some people don't want the responsibility of leadership. Some people don't. And, you know, and that calls into an even greater question of like, why? You know, like, why don't you want to be a leader? You know, and I think in a certain respect, one, a lot of people don't want the responsibility. And then two, it slightly reflects on, you know, something we were discussing yesterday of laziness.
Yeah.
People are just lazy. They just like, dude, I don't want to lead. Just tell me, you know, like this is slightly
Just
one of the
tell
reasons
me where
why,
to fit into the mold and
yeah,
I'll go,
like
right?
let me know, you know, like tell me what to do, you know, show me where to go, like, you know, all of this kind of stuff. You know, it's like, I mean, I know, and I think this is interesting. It's an interesting dynamic that plays out in certain human behavior because of like, you know, this is why in some aspects, like I'm going to share this particular topic. It's why the BDSM community partially exists within the framework of human nature, because, you know, it's why these CEOs actually end up being these subs for these DOMs, because it's like I spend all of my day telling people what to do. I just want somebody to tell me to get on my knees and, you know, like lick my boot, you know, like this type of stuff. So, you know, I think playing within these dynamics is really interesting of human behavior and human kind of control frameworks, because of how, you know, like I know, especially even my own experience, it's like I spend like 80% of all my time always having to, I don't want to necessarily say telling people what to do, but more so just like having to help guide people through a lot of this process, that when it comes to me on my off day, dude, tell me to go clean my room, tell me to go, like, you know, shine my shoes, like do all of this, like, please, by all means, like if you're my partner, if you're my lover, if you're my beloved, like tell me to go cook you dinner, because I will, because I totally will, because, you know, it's like I don't often have the opportunity for somebody to like tell me what to do, because I am always having to do what I want versus, you know, to take charge and all this kind of stuff. So, you know, I think playing within these dynamics and kind of figuring out, you know, like what people gravitate to from a natural state, and then also what they fall into from a submissive state, is also another, you know, layer that you can kind of play into. So
It's kind of like they're in their prefrontal cortex or if they're in their amygdala as well.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's like if they're prefrontal cortex, they're able to focus, go forward. But if they're in their amygdala, they're looking for hypervigilance of what else is in the field at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And right now we have the halo of Corona that's kind of throwing people into an amygdala hijacking and for all different directions. Hey, what do I need to have in order to feel safe and get through this?
Toilet paper. And then I was going to say one thing, Shane, I love everything you said. And I was going to also just say that is why not everyone is a shaman. Not everyone is a Sherpa. Not everyone holds these responsibilities, that not everyone feels them so deeply either. And that's 100% okay, right? But then it's about pairing the groups so that you have the structure where the shaman can do the shaman role, and the person that wants to be led feels like they're deeply contributing in the best being led way possible, you know?
Agreed.
And I think it's
so
sometimes
agree.
Guided is the word I like more.
Yeah.
Yeah, guided, whatever it might be, and led, guided, journeying with, you know, journeying together, but yeah.
I think it's also like some people like to have that conversing of the conversation because it brings another layer up out of them than just being alone trying to do something. So it's like that, having that collaborative, and even in the sound community, it's like being able to play with someone else, you have a completely different, you know, what arises from it.
And even the shaman has to learn what they need, right? They have to deeply listen in order to guide correctly, right? There's an art with that has to be very much in play, because it's a good shaman is frankly almost like a silent leader. They just literally are able to help you, weave in what you need without, they're helping you literally activate your own ability inside, your own spark, your own desire with it. And they're just there to kind of, say, hey, this is maybe the spark you're looking to go for.
Yeah. So I love so much the this like cultural layer that can be established with like informing, like designing for trust, designing for inclusion, celebrating contribution as well. Like these are all going to be kind of key elements of designing the game, and I just love how we're co-creating those pieces. I'd love to come back into, because it's sort of like there's a beautiful thing about the game is like there's so many aspects of society that can be brought in as experiments into it. Um, but coming back to now, what we do from this moment going forth, and feels to me that the like invitation to those existing teams saying like the invitation is for you to continue or join another one, or suggest people for that, and just we see who would want to step forward as a kind of Sherpa, and say rather than maybe team captains or team leads, call them team Sherpas, and then like invite those projects to meet, and say that we've created a digital environment for them, because this is what Savannah's already got. Is it's got an online platform for like communication, document sharing, video conferencing, polling, calendaring, like surveys, open working groups, bringing in experts from anywhere in the world, like a mobile app, whiteboards, like all of these different tools that could be used, a digital wallet to get paid, are all in an open source stack already that we've spent the last 2 years kind of getting to. And so what we want to do is like get to that point where some of these initial pods can like test and kick the tires on that digital environment. And then, because it's all open source, which means it can be rapidly evolved to meet the needs of the game. But it's still like that's a kind of key strategy from this moment. And then what our role here is, because we're limited on bandwidth, but how could we go into food next week and kick that off so we have a new like anchor point to get feedback on the game on, as well as something where I think like anyone, when you mention to an investor, like getting, kind of getting ready to try and present this as a fundable structure to people like Mark Benioff. If we can present this, that we've done this with sound and done this with food, somehow the two of them are such like anchor points on any like layers of a new society or a new systemic change, that they're probably two best ones we can pick, and then the third one will be community. But we need to figure out from our side, like, how can we create topics that are kind of beat, that has got the feedback coming into the game and is like still being able to be flexible to change the structure. And so just your thoughts on this is really just really timely, because what we could do is kick off next week. If each of you would want to pick a topic, and we can try and build some pods around that and build energy towards it, and like try and recruit new people with you and with the existing members might be a way that we could support. And I think getting through each of these like birth gates is it feels like a miniature labor, It's like, what do we do? Which way do we go?
Yeah, I am totally open to that. I unfortunately have to sing on another Zoom call at 12:30, so I have to jump off, but I would love to be part of be a Sherpa. And you guys, I will maybe try to follow up with you, Lucian, after 1 o'clock and see what the rest of the conversation was.
I feel like we're getting really close. I'll be a Sherpa. I'll do the sound as well. And I already know several people that want to get involved. It would be some new, Micah and some others that were involved already. They're already like, I have calls with them later today about what's next. And more people from those circles that are wanting in. So we saw a lot of momentum that we can, carry forward with.
Yeah, I think that that's a great idea, is just to see, how we can move the needle this way. And
I think centralizing the topics too, because of the cross pollination portion. So then that way it'll give a maybe not necessarily more of a focus, but more of whatever is suggested around the particular topics can be applied to more than one, because obviously we know that they can be applied more to one. And then also as I mentioned earlier, like either through Savannah House taking a look at like, okay, now we've centralized the topics. What is the current model within these topics? And whether that's something you guys devise on your own, or whether you give back to the group of like, okay, everybody come up with the current model, like, because through everybody's experience, through everybody's expertise, you tell me what is going on within the current model, like that's dealing with sound pollution, that's dealing with soundscaping, which is dealing with sound reference and all of this kind of stuff. What is the current model that's being done to address these things, and how can we improve upon them? Because that ultimately is the goal here, right? Is to be able to, because the solution is not going to be by just addressing the current model. It's by improving upon it ultimately. And the only way to do that is to get everybody's fresh kind of perspectives on like, okay, cool. Like for instance, I mean, I could talk about the varying solutions that I addressed in looking at my modeling, because I was just like, wow, this particular model lacks this, it doesn't have this, why it doesn't have this. And it's kind of and how I got there was by kind of looking at how other models are doing it to kind of fill in the gaps that have nothing to do with even like sound healing. And this is where kind of the innovation came to me, because I was like, oh, like, why don't we have financing for sound healing instruments? Why don't we have insurance, like a whole insurance company that takes care of sound healing instruments? Why don't we have more collective
please get insurance involved.
That's like
What?
like just wait for the game on insurance. Insurance Planet Commons. Like,
I will have some comments there.
where we're all like, it's so obvious. It's so like,
Oh my God.
like
Yeah.
we don't need the existing structures to be the way they are. There's like really like amazing new technologies for reinventing peer-to-peer insurance.
Totally. I mean, because realistically, and I hate to say this last piece, but I'm just gonna say it because being a younger person in the community, having kind of grown into this over the past 10 years, a lot of the pre-existing modeling around sound healing is it's very archaic. It's like, and it's been pioneered by, respectfully, our elders, but it's outdated because of the evolution of what we have seen over approximately the past 30 years of just the information dump of the internet and the availability of science, the information age, and just kind of the innovation of technology over the past 30 years. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of the way that sound healing has been kind of proliferated within the global economy is just incredibly outdated. And so we need to really have more fresh outlooks of how to utilize social marketing and all of these other scalable concepts to really bring this into a much more desirable and I don't want to say profit or revenue generating opportunities, but more so that is just a byproduct of our ability to streamline this and create more scalability through it. And like looking at a lot of the companies that are kind of in a certain respect monopolizing over the market. And I'm just going to throw this out there, and it's not that I have any
Just
Not that I have
one,
any.
1 second, Shane. 1 second.
Sure.
Throw it in 1 minute. Just can we all honor Serena and Serena's?
Sorry,
Oh,
Shane.
yeah.
I've got to run, but I'm
Oh,
so
yeah, no worries.
excited. I can't wait. And I'm so excited for more. And have a good day, everyone. Okay.
Thanks
You
for
too,
being
Serena.
here.
Thank you.
Bye.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
I got that one as well.
Yeah.
But
Have a
essentially,
cool
like,
one.
you know, like Crystal Tones essentially monopolizes the crystal bowl market. And there's a reason for that. And they don't need to, like, in the sense that, you know, a lot of people, the way they view sound healing is like, oh, I have to go spend $3,000 on this crystal bowl. And it's like, no, you don't, you know, like, because a lot of the market or a lot of the modeling I did was like, oh, wow, you know, like this is the global scale of the sound healing market. And if we can kind of niche out like at least like 3 to 5% of that, what that equates to is easily millions upon millions of dollars. And it's just a certain percent.
And do you feel like, so do you feel that the cooperative advantage of creating business models that are in service to the commons, serving ideas like getting one of these bowls into every school and that being a kind of, you know, essentially like this commons circle, do you feel that if those business models could get funded appropriately, so those people that were dedicating their life and their time to creating them would be rewarded like equally, if not better, than if they were to go and start a company and try and do it in the model, in the existing frame?
I
Do you feel
believe
that?
so, yes.
Yeah.
Because in a certain respect, and Andrea and I were talking about this yesterday, in that a lot of these companies that are pre-existing within the sound healing community, they're self-serving. You know, they talk about being part of the community, but what do they do really? Like in the sense of like doing full community outreach, and that's not to discredit the opportunities or the support they've already done. It's more so that the reach that they have, because the bigger question is not why is this like, you know, like this bowl is $3,000, but in the reality of it, from a manufacturing process, from, you know, and all of this kind of stuff, why are you charging that? If your ultimate goal is to provide healing on a massive scale. And this is for years something I've tried to figure out.
Well,
And you know, like
this is fundamental, Shane. It's like it's fundamental to the design of the current system.
right.
The game is, if the game changes the rules of like how you get remunerated for creating value for the maximum number of people that are participating in this commons, because what ends up happening is you actually end up starting to have a really much smaller commons because it's everybody playing the game. And that creates an incentive for more people to play the game, because then they start to access this whole marketplace of things. And that's where the currency stars comes in.
Yeah.
But
Because that's my thing within the sound healing community, is that
Hmm.
if the ultimate goal is to provide healing, then why is the accessibility gateway so incredibly jacked up in terms of like, you know, you have to have X amount of dollars to even get through the door?
Yeah.
Not that having high caliber or high valued items is a negative, but more so of like, you know, and I use crystal tones as just an example, not that they not not to recognize that they have products that are on the lower scale that are more viable and accessible. But you know, like, why is a gemstone infused crystal bowl $4,000? And I mean, don't get me wrong, I know why, but it's just more of like from a marketability perspective of somebody who's like just trying to get a tool for their own healing. It's like the granddaddy version of it is like $7,000. It's just like, dude, you might as well just like sell one of my kidneys and then like I won't have any more problems, you know? So it's like, this is where the interchange of currency, of energy, is a little off to me. And this is where, from a certain perspective, we need to create new businesses that really balance the scales of how these products actually get into people's hands. And you know, like, and part of the reason why, for instance, crystal tones is so prolific in that it's the most well known is because they were the ones who kind of set the standard. and nobody has really kind of like gone up against them too much to like kind of change the environment. And this is partly one of the reasons why I was like, that's going to be one of the funnels that I have to tackle, because ultimately I want more and more people to have crystal bowls at their house, because it's just like, at least from a product perspective. So
this is Clay Christensen's innovator's dilemma at like a systemic scale.
right.
So it's actually very hard to break the mold of the existing system, because there's so much institutional advantage
Right.
that comes from replicating it.
Right.
So it's almost like, don't look to that for where the change is going to come from. Back to your earlier point about having a first principles, like if truly what the objective of the accelerator is planetary commons solutions, then this is like a key piece of like how we think about like what's the DNA of a particular business model.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I've identified of how to break the model is to essentially create the same level of quality product or better product at a cheaper price. There was I remember in our Founders Institute program, there was, unfortunately I can't remember the meme, but it was like three things. It was like cost, quality, and something else. And if you do out of the three, you only can do two of the three really well. And so
yeah.
And depending on how you shuffle the thing, it's like, because you can do something at cost, at quality, but then it suffers time, or like it's all these kind of weird like shuffles of the thing. But I can't remember fully what it was. This was, I remember when we were looking at it, I was like, oh my god, this is the exact kind of thing I'm looking to address within the sound healing community, because you have a really expensive product that takes a lot of time, that is a really good quality, but how do you like change the model so that you can still create something that's quality product, that's less cost, and still maximizes time in terms of efficiency?
Yeah, well, I think what you're getting at, ultimately, my prayer for the game is it starts to turn into like new centers of manufacturing, new models that's in service of the commons, is like funneling through, because it's like the game provides organizational structures cooperative advantage, and it goes to demonstrate that cooperation is a better strategy than competition.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a fundamental tipping point in any systemic change. Until we get to that point, until we're actually financially incentivizing competition over cooperation, we're not going to get that big lever thing that's going to happen, that pitch point, civilizational kind of, it's like a civilizational hinge, where we go in a different direction, and that is fundamental design principles around like how do we economically incentivize energy exchange.
Totally.
And
Yeah, I mean, that was part of the modeling that I created within essentially creating a new crystal bowl company,
right.
by being able to create a better quality product, incentivizing ambassadorship, combined with providing more tools or resources that don't currently exist within the model, or at least within the current model, which I don't understand.
So Shane, like how, you've got our support on like thought partner, all the different ways we possibly can support from a kind of structural perspective. Bringing this kind of concept into the planetary commons, and like creating essentially an ecosystem that is self-fulfilling. So like, as we go now into next week and we think about Sprout, and we think about now an invitation of like self-organizing collective intelligence through this Sherpa model, and do you feel just putting a kind of clarion call out to the whole group of 22 and saying like, we're looking for Sherpas for each group who would be interested? Or do you think we should go and already start to group the groups into like, let's say we go from 8 to 4 and just say these two are going to go together, these two are going to go together. And it doesn't mean that you can't break in the future, but we're just going to have 4 pods go from 8 to 4 maybe for Sprout. That would be like just listening to your feedback, one way of testing that kind of concept.
I mean, I suppose you could go through it in two spectrums. One would be the version of what you just mentioned,
Yeah.
where you could essentially give the 8 topics to all the 22 leaders or all the 22 participants, and then have them group them according to their own interest in terms of cross pollination. And then you can take all of the 22 feedback pieces and then see like, okay, cool. Out of the 22 people, they all paired these the same way or differently. And then the other version of it would be that you guys just do it and then just tell us like, okay, cool. So out of the 8 topics, we actually centralize them into these 4 topics. Now, out of the 22 people, who wants to be part of these 4 groups? And then that way, there's a.
What do you feel would be most effective, and what do you feel would be the most likely thing to like structure in the longer term in a kind of scalable fashion?
I mean, I think this is where that particular question is going to be slightly challenging to fully know until you do more of it, because of from an aspect of expertise. And what I mean by that is that everybody who's going to be involved is all going to have their own layer of experience in how they can contribute. And if you guys do it, and so I'm going to play devil's advocate on both sides of the spectrum. If you guys do it, it might delineate that that expertise, because you may not tap into it in the moment of like, oh, like Sarah's really good for this, or Andrea's really good for this, and that's all based off of your either presumption or your experience of these people contributing, versus the other people on the other side of the spectrum, where if everybody gets to choose, like, okay, cool, this is how I grouped and this is how I paired, then and then I don't know, you could also potentially ask them like, okay, as you guys group and pair them into 4 groups, maybe leave a little star next to which particular group you would want to be a part of. So then that way, as you all are kind of, grouping all the information together, you guys can see like, okay, cool. Like Sarah marked like, okay, this is the first group out of the 4 groups. I want to be part of group 1, 2, 3, and 4, and this is the kind of like ranking of which one's more important to me. And then that way, you can kind of more efficiently group people according to their own interest within their own grouping of how they decided like, okay, this is the cross-pollination of how these things kind of interact with each other. So so I mean, on both sides of the spectrum, I can't really fully advise like which one would be better. I think it's going to be, as you guys have mentioned previously, like kind of going at your own pace and kind of just putting this together.
Yeah.
And just seeing what works, and because failure is really actually the only way we learn. So it's the more that you can fail at this whole process and refine and refine and refine, versus trying to shoot out of the cannon, like everything's already strapped up and good to go. I think this process will need to go through a couple polishes anyways before really fully understanding.
Yeah, I completely agree.
What actually really works, and then also seeing too, like, because some people might just be like, no, tell me what group to be in, and other people might just be like, no, actually, I want to choose. So
what do we kind of see as the like 4 that you're kind of looking at from the 8?
That's more what I was going to ask you. Like I did just take a look on and like go through in my mind this, like I think the sound, like the sound portals and the sound in school and resonance centers could all be somewhat related. Definitely resonance centers and sound portals. There could be like some
They
parallel.
kind of work together.
You know, I think like the sound genome and Sound Institute are like clearly connected and could be the same like effort, that the sound genome could come from the Sound Institute, and it could be one of the ways, you know, that feels like it could be grouped. So that's two out of the four. I would say like transcendent sound and self-playing bowls could be connected. Shane, going to you on that one. Like transcend exploring the fundamental interconnection into well, let's definitely say transcendent sound and sound psychology could be connected.
I
Those
think psychology can still go up to genealogy and institute as well, because one of the beneficial factors shows the psychological aspects of sound, as it's the, you know, emotional, physical, social, relational aspects.
that's true.
Like
Self
psychology has, like, I think it's going to go over all of them in different ways, because sound is like such a psychological and feeling resonance.
Yeah. So I mean, just this is helpful just to get feedback on. So would you be able to just take notes of this, Brian? It's so if we like, we can definitely group upload number one sound portals with resonance centers 5. So one and 5 is super aligned, and I think would contribute a lot. We could definitely connect the Sound Institute,
The 2 and 3.
the Sound Genome, and the Sound Psychology 7.
Mm-hmm.
And Transcendent Sound, actually. Those 4 could get connected.
Because it's spiritual. I mean, you're looking.
They're all like part of the institute, you know. They're all like almost like programs of an institute.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Transcendent Sound, it's like that's a research project. Sound, you know, it's a research project of the institute, and then the institute's got a marketing function as well. So that's kind of like, it's almost like Institute for the Future of Sound, Institute for the Future, if you know that organization, or sound, you know.
Or the remembrance of sound. The true remembrance of sound. That's what we're really after more than anything else.
Exactly. And then what I would say is, I completely agree with you, Andrea. And I would then group, if it was me, I would group Sound School with self-playing bowls. Because I think one of the best ways to test a market for commons developed bowls would be for public spaces, where like a sound healer can't be expected to be there, but we could have like a bowl in every airport, or a bowl in like that would be in the commons, and it would be a way to like it would be a way to make like a mass number of people aware of like this effort to create value for the commons, like through sound. Like it's literally a kind of, you're walking into a new form of advert.
A new yoga room.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're having a sound room. You want to chill out? Do that.
How
I
does
think
that-
also too, you know, we don't have to entirely group
Yeah.
the eight topics into just only 4 groups. You know, like
Yeah.
I was just that as a
Totally. So this just is what feels natural. It's actually 3 groups. It's 3 groups, and we could go and say these are the 3 groups. We're looking for 3 Sherpas, and I mean, maybe, you know, if we could get to that point today, you know, where we say that, okay, well, Serena is happy to be the Sherpa for group sound portals and resonance centers. And I appreciate, Emil, you might want to like co-Sherpa that one. like try out coming together, and you may actually be like, actually these are different, you know, I don't want to put, because you've both been involved in that. And then Andrea, you if you would be willing to Sherpa the next stage of Sound Institute, which could then bring in like as projects essentially, Sound Genome.
Yeah, it's like, I think it's like kind of a co-Sherpa type of thing. If we could
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
two people kind of like it different, you know, the yin and the yang, or I mean, not even the yin and the yang, but it just has that component. It's like you're gonna have that within, but like, you know, you have David Gibson and all the other different people that have some of the researcher, Leo, that already have different institutes that they're doing these type of works in, per se, that I'm just finding out more information about the people that were even in the group that I didn't know before.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And then, I mean, that would be that could be a really interesting way, because the Institute potentially has got like actually it's like a frame to build other games from.
Mhm.
It's like an interesting position actually, because it could be like more of a like a structural innovation as opposed to a directed innovation, that the Institute would like serve as put it this way, as the Institute would be a train station, not a train on the tracks.
Mhm.
Particular direction. I think we're going to see like train stations emerge along the way for these kind of like the organizational structures that will organize other community efforts.
Yeah.
So that could be that feels like very achievable, to go to the whole group and say, we've got 3 Sherpas, we welcome more, but we're going to group these together.
Like a council. I mean, we'll have the Sherpa, but I think it's like the council aspect that Shane was speaking of.
Yeah.
It's like everyone is equal bringing into this. We just have people that are as Sherpaing in one way to.
Yeah. We talk about like maybe each of these pods could be formed. We talk about vertical guilds and horizontal councils. And so vertical guilds would be a good example, like self-playing bowls for and connecting that with public spaces. So like opening up the, because Shane, I think this could be a really kind of effective way of bringing this concept in, of saying like, this is going to bring sound technologies to many millions of people that traditionally haven't been exposed to it, through the school system, through the public space system, through, and like that's part of like the distribution model for this effort. And so that
yeah, the widening application of having a device that no longer requires an actual player to do it is what will, at least in the way I've modeled it, the applications are endless, because
Yeah.
how you can apply it to schools, hospitals, get it into military, corporations, you know, like every Starbucks would have one, everybody's house would have one. Like this is where, when I started, you know, the
just
the outlandish idea of it was like crazy. So
I just want to quickly, Brian, thank you so much. I've known your presence here, felt it, and listening for the telepathy there.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I've had really bad service, so I haven't known when to chime in here. But gosh, this is all just so in alignment with long-time dreams and visions that I've had, and I truly want to stay involved in just really supporting this vision and this mission. It's really incredible work that is happening here. So thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Brian. Appreciate you.
You guys as well. We'll be in touch. I'll see you all soon.
Thank you. Would love you to jump in one of these.
I really want to. I've actually had a lot to say on a lot of these topics, but have also just been totally content with listening to everyone's perspective. And but I would love to contribute more and offer my perspectives as well. And actually had a few visions and ideas that have come through in the last couple of days. Maybe I'll compose a little email to you, Lucien, and share some of my thoughts and my ideas with you.
Please.
But
and if you could,
yeah.
if you could put that in the questionnaire as well, that will go to all of us in a way that's like, will
Okay.
be, that questionnaire is a great place to give that feedback in a kind of structured way that we can like really build into the game.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got it. And like I said, again, this is all so in alignment with a true heart and soul calling I've had for many, many years, and of just a greater vision of how I can contribute to healing the consciousness of the planet. And this is so in alignment with that. So I'm tuning in as much as I can. I do have three young children right now, so a lot of times I'm juggling other things, but thank you so much for everything everybody's doing. And yes, I'll compose an email for the what did you call it, for the
if you do the questionnaire, it's in
the questionnaire. Yes.
Yeah, and then and feel free to send me an email as well. But that's like going to be the way that we can really take point by point each of your pieces of feedback and make sure it's kind of actually like designed in.
Understood.
So
yeah, that sounds great. I will definitely do that. And I'm actually just dropping out of service here. My parents have a 100-acre ranch kind of out in the middle of nowhere in Oregon, and so I'm going to help my dad for a bit on the farm.
Enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, keep up the good work. And I feel like we're so onto something huge here and really important. And I totally wish to stay involved. So
yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Absolutely.
I feel like we've really diluted, each day has actually got like, we've crystallized something more. So thank you.
Absolutely, guys. Yeah, many blessings, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Yeah.
All right. Take care.
Thank you. We're getting to the end of our retrospective times together. Yeah, it's this just enormously appreciated. So if Emil, you want to share and we'll come to close in 4 minutes. I had thought you said something, Emil.
Yeah,
okay.
my connection, my signal is being really weird for some reason today. But I really love how this is flowing and the momentum and creativity and seeds. I know that my passion right now, which is
Emil, we're struggling. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Try taking your video off.
Okay. Let's see.
Much better.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Cool.
Yeah, we can hear you now.
So, I would love to keep working with soundscaping or collaborate in the group with Serena. And I have a very strong vision of how I'd like to bring sound into hospitals and other places that is, different from kind of how David Gibson wants to approach it with more the like frequency technology. And I would love to kind of enroll people from the group and outside of the group in that project of approaching hospitals with models and finding funders and creating a project that you guys can potentially help fund. And I've been, rolling balls along this for like a year or two now, at least. Yeah, like 2 years now. I've been talking to people in hospitals and talking to sound healer friends of mine that are really enthusiastic. So
let's like we want to be we want to be rocket fuel for you.
Yeah, so
it's like we can't like that. The only way we can do that is like all of us doing that together. It's like we're co-creating this. So, but that would be we'd really like to create a dream manifestation game engine.
Beautiful. So I just wanted to put that in there as we move into this next phase because I'm
beautiful. Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. And so maybe if you could be a Sherpa and that could be an element that we connect with sound portals as like a very like that's in a very immediate way for sound portals like those space resonance centers to be like a test market in the same way as like schools could be a test market for the self-playing bowls.
And I'd like to stay in touch with that just because of the healthcare hospital models.
Yeah.
I know we kind of all talked about, how to get in there in ways that it's complementary to what's already within the system. And then as new hospitals get built, that there's sound rooms in them.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much. So and then Andrea, I'd love to again like the sort of train station of the institute. That would be like thinking of and I imagine David Gibson will be wanting
Yeah,
to.
I think that there's something with his, but I think it's also like the educational, like it's like all of this, it's like you have to show the benefits of why we're doing this. It's like there's an overarching theme that all of these areas are like in synergy to each other.
Yeah.
And it's like they're all going to cross-pollinate to each other in different ways.
Yeah.
And forward.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Definitely when it comes to and definitely when it comes down to looking at the financial numbers, and I don't mean necessarily in the profit revenue, but more so in terms of the startups and stuff. I've already spent a good chunk of my time like talking to a lot of different people within robotics, looking at a lot of different components. So I've already kind of come up with an idea of like what those numbers look like for startup capital. And thankfully, beautifully, it's actually pretty cheap comparatively to like, having to get millions of dollars to try to push this thing forward. But in terms of like singular prototyping and getting it done,
yeah,
relatively all less than about 150K. So
by harvest stage, we want those numbers and like those numbers literally connected to digital wallets that people can be like, put money in here. But that's like a design, like we've got to build that design, but imagine how elegant that would be, right? Yeah. If every week there was like a ton of funders that would like see what was coming out and just being like, fund, and like, we need like pensions should like the world's pensions should fund the game. Yeah. Like, because ultimately, like, why do you want to have a pension that you won't access because the world won't have stability for your money? It's like we should diversify. That this is a flywheel.
I mean, it would be great if CEO and companies that are destroying the world actually are required to invest money into systems that are actually regenerating the world. That would be great.
Or Bezos that's making a lot of money on shipping right now of everything. But that would just fund back into when these things all get shipped out in its own way.
There's a lot of there's a lot that you can play with when the game is a myth engine too. There's a lot of scope here for some deep like jiu-jitsu moves on capitalism. And the beautiful thing I was saying to Katie here last night was that sometimes it's helpful to be underestimated and to be at the fringes of like where people might be traditionally looking for new systems and to call it a game, but like actually to do some kind of deeper structural using that place of play and like to different looking enough from the current system to use that as an advantage is actually a tactic. Because I think that's where it's going to be effective is it's even a completely different language to the current paradigm. So thank you all. Thank you so much. Let's wrap up here. I want to be respectful of like the 1 hour every day has turned into 2 and could go on more. And we just really appreciate you, each one of you, for helping co-create and birth this. I hope it feels truly like our baby. So
Indeed, it does. Are we meeting tomorrow?
we're not going to meet tomorrow. We're going to do some coordination online, like bring it tomorrow. Wait, what day is it today?
Thursday.
Yeah. It's just today.
Okay.
And we'll follow up about like what happens next week and how we sharpen that and how we support.
Cool.
Awesome. This has been amazing. Thank you
You
for
all so much. Yeah.
creating this portal for all of us and everyone
Oh.
showing up with their gifts, because it's amazing.
A slight side note, Lucian, I don't know if you're aware of it. I can send you the links to it, but they're doing a memorial for Boz online this weekend. And Andrea, you're obviously invited to this as well. I don't know the fuller details of what they're constructing. I'm presuming it might be somewhat similar to like a Zoom call or maybe a Twitch or something. But there's a Facebook group that's been created, remembering Boz, and they've been putting all of it together. So hopefully more information will come out of like when the actual like celebration of life is going to happen in the online model. So
I had suggested that it would be cool to do it at 11:11 on Saturday, but like I don't have the bandwidth to kind of organize it and create it. And I got some feedback from other people that deal with Boz that might be too soon.
Yeah.
And we did it with Tony. You know, we did this beautiful like 300-400 person memorial through a Zoom webinar.
Wow.
And it feels completely surreal to be part of like organizing that again.
Sure.
But yeah, and I know, Shane, I actually met you through Boz. Just remembering that now.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very unfortunate circumstance of his kind of quickening of exit strategy from the planet. So
I hear him screaming "Yeehaw!"
I was talking to somebody yesterday about it, that I have a feeling he is kind of in the ethers, like laughing at the joke of like, learn this lesson, guys. I'm out.
Peace, or I'm out, or I'm doubling down.
Yeah.
Like I was inviting him in my dreams last night, and very much invite him to help shape this game. I trust his codes. So
yeah, I had talked to Jules about we should all do a collective prayer to Boz to all jump into Lucid Land and meet on the playa in the ether, so we can all go experience the universe together.
One of the reasons I was envisioning 11:11 is its remote burn, and I for one was gonna go from Boz Memorial to Digital Ether, Lucid Land, remote burn, and go maybe take a tour together to the temple, and then I think it's a good way to salute our dear brother.
Yeah.
You know, one of my last favorite memories on the playa was with one of Boz's other dear friends, Austin. I lassoed the moon and like pulled it in, being like, Boz, we're calling you in. And sure enough, out of 75,000 people, Boz showed up. Wow. Just like a kind of,
Interesting.
Just a beautiful, just realms and frequencies that sometimes people can show you are just so right there, just waiting for you to believe in them. So, thank you. I want to just deeply acknowledge both of your relationship with Boz as well. And I know we didn't.
Yours.
Yeah, we didn't create space for that at the beginning, but he's with us all.
Yeah, totally. It's a shame. It's a shame that we have to come together to celebrate his life in this way. So, but I suppose in the conversation I had with Jules, a lot of the sadness is actually less about pause and more
Mm.
of us having to deal with like not even him being gone, but just like, oh, we're still here, damn it. Like, we got gypped.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you all. Should we leave with I maybe we could leave with this, that we sung it yesterday, and it feels just so appropriate for Boz right now, that we all sing together, "May the Long Time Sun."
Mm.
Mm.
May the long time sun shine upon
You.
all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way, guide your way home. Peace, Boz.
Thanks,
Thank
Bob.
you.
Thank you.
Much love.